We have lots of videos that come through on our YouTube channel. We also will have the recording available on the APMG International channel. There we go. And so now we have everyone online, and it is time. So I'm going to hand over to Mark. And welcome, Mark. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this webinar, Improve Your Strategy Delivery by Thinking Big. So this is a collaborative event between APMG International, Good Governance Academy, and the Core P3M Data Club. My name's Mark Constable. I'll be your host and moderator for the session. It's a pleasure to be joined, as you see, my two guests here, David Dunning and Carolyn Chalmers. So David's the founder of the Core P3M Data Club, and Carolyn is the CEO of Good Governance Academy. So before David and Carolyn get into the detail, I'll provide a quick intro of what the webinar is about today. So we're all aware of how important it is to deliver projects, programs, and strategic objectives, but the problem is, and as continuous reports and studies demonstrate, we don't always get it right. So over the next 45 minutes or so, with some time for questions towards the end, David and Carolyn will explain how organisations and practitioners can leverage the ISO 37000 standard and the business integrated governance model to help transform projects, programme and strategy delivery. So between them, David and Carolyn have a wealth of experience when it comes to projects, programme and strategy delivery and corporate governance. So you're really in expert hands for the session today. And just a few housekeeping points just before we get started. So as Carolyn's already confirmed, we are recording the session today, and we'll make that available both via all three organisations. You're welcome to submit questions at any point throughout the session, so use the chat or Q&A function within the Zoom platform, and we'll be keeping a close eye on them as we go. And we welcome any feedback, so that helps us with planning and delivering webinars in the future, so all feedback very much welcome. Okay, I think we're set, so without further ado, I'll hand things over to David and Carolyn now. Great to have you with us both, and I think it's to you first, David.
Yes, thanks for coming, everyone. Just to lay out what we're going to cover today, it's going to be quite a whistle stop. So maybe on the playback, stick it on slow when you watch it again. But we're going to try and establish the case, present to you and share with you why we think strategy delivery is not perfect. Some anecdotes, some experiences we'll look to share. We'll look to use Slido, and there's a reference at the bottom of the screen for slido.com. You can access it on your phone and type in an event number there at the appropriate moment, and we'll brainstorm and gather from you guys your experience of strategy delivery not being perfect or it being perfect, whatever that is. So we'll hopefully understand that. We'll position effective governance as the means to improve strategy delivery, assuming that magic doesn't somehow just happen. And then we'll position some honest engineering as the answer to providing effective governance framework, positioning ISO 37000 as the background set of principles and practice to draw from. But then discuss with you perhaps that principles are great, methods are great, but we need to implement an operating model to make it work. And again, recognizing that magic doesn't just happen. And entertain another brainstorm to hear your viewpoints using another Slido as to what's your experience of trying to implement strategy delivery solutions. So first one is, what do you think about strategy delivery, but what's been your experience of trying to put a strategy delivery framework in place? Has that been good? And then we'll position business integrated governance as the means to with a life cycle and model to set up an organization to exploit the principles of ISO 37000 to help alleviate many of the issues in strategy delivery. And chat some next steps.
Yeah, can I, sorry to interrupt, if I can just position, this is the first in our discussion forum on integrated governance. And we're going to have a lot more of these kinds of discussions around integrating governance across the organization. And this is one way of doing that is, and leveraging integrated governance is to ensure that we have an effective strategy. So hop onto our page, the discussion forum page for integrated governance, and you can follow our updates there. So just a marketing message. Thanks, David.
So as you've gathered, this is a double act. I wouldn't say we're Laurel and Hardy, but the style of presentation is me chat a bit, Carolyn interject, and hopefully it'll be somewhat conversational. So and it worked well. It's worked well before. So step one, then, establish the case. Strategy delivery is not perfect. Big statement. Some folks wouldn't like us to say that, but we don't always see strategy delivery as happening as effectively as it should. And in some recent events, we've run a couple of events entitled Your Strategic Wish is My Delivery Command, if only it were that simple. Myself and another strategy specialist have basically invited folks along. We've run events with CEOs, various directors, heads of strategy, senior people and when we're probing people's experience of strategy delivery, and we've teased out of those groups what their experiences are, what they've been, what pains they face. And in this session, we surfaced 100 points, and we've repeated it, and we've got about 150 key points as to why strategy delivery isn't particularly good. And we've done write-ups, so that's shareable. And please don't try and read this right now, but in the slide set, you can access it and have a look. But we've teased a whole bunch of points out. We've understood what those mean. We've tried to analyze and make sense of it. And in essence, the key areas we're finding are the difficulty in operational delivery, difficulty prioritizing resource across business as usual, change, difficult to share information, disjointed and ineffective governance operation, issues with people and culture, strategic management. Have a look in the detail. But we've teased out a whole bunch of points which you can read. And what we also found was that different people in the senior echelons of our organizations have different perspectives. So sometimes the difficulty in getting strategy delivery right is because people have different expectations and perceptions of their organizations, and will want to address different things if at all. So it's very difficult to get out of people what their pain points are, and then get a consensus across a business as to what those should be and what therefore should be the collective response to those issues. There's another event we've run. I'll share the results to that a bit later. But Karen, does this resonate with you? Have you seen this sort of stuff, these kind of responses that strategy delivery isn't great and is viewed differently by different roles? Oh, you're on quiet, Carolyn.
Sorry, rookie mistake. Yeah, absolutely. I think this resonates well with all the programs and projects that I've been involved in. What I do find is, the senior leadership team really just isn't equipped to make the hard decisions. So when, projects are going south, to actually pull the plug on a project, just don't have the information necessary to do that. So then you see programs, especially the very large ones, the very expensive ones, just limping along, throwing good money after bad, because no one wants to cancel it. No one wants to admit defeat, and no one has the right information to very confidently make a call on it. So I see a lot of that happening in terms of the very large projects, but you've really, got the whole view here in terms of the need for an integrated approach. So Prof. King talks about what is the etymology of the word, the origins of the word integrated, and it means system. So really we need to have a system of these people working together to effectively see strategy formulate successfully through the organization without value leakage as every step of the way.
Yeah, and if one domain tries to address the problems from its perspective, what we're suggesting here is that there are a whole bunch of different sources of the problem. So one domain addressing one set of themes won't nail the integrated system.
That's right. And then you just get one perspective being brought to the program, whereas actually you need a balanced perspective for value to be generated across the whole organization.
So we've got some observations, and here's one observation. I don't know how this will resonate with folks, so Carolyn will explain how it resonates with her. But in a stereotype, we sometimes bump into organisations that have shareholders and owners. They will have expectations that they'll wish their leadership teams to carry out on their behalf, objectives that they expect, and in many cases we see very nicely presented 5-year plans, which are great statements of what's intended. So the shareholders get a copy, they wave it around, it's all very nice. But are those always as flexible and realistic as we expect them to be? And how well do we actually turn those into real business plans? How well integrated is the 5-year plan into what the business is actually doing? And if we do come up with business plans or even departmental plans, how can we see into the business to understand all the fundamentals and preparations are happening effectively? And might I suggest, controversially perhaps, that there's often a veneer of connection offered, and the detail of the connection isn't probed too much if our profitability is good. But it means that perhaps our organisations are strategically unaware, they're not really prepared, and it doesn't really happen all that well. I don't know if that's an unfair stereotype, Carolyn.
No, this is very fair. I often talk about the death by 1,000 cuts as the strategy's death, because throughout that process, you've got this value leakage. So the 5-year plan, as you say, static, inflexible. We can't really plan in 5 years what the market's going to look like, what competitors are around. I mean, the digital world is just so fast innovating. But then because you've got, the budget's been approved and it's been approved by the board and all the shareholders, and that it tends to, that's what you track to. It doesn't matter if there's any change. Why haven't you delivered against this inflexible strategy? This is what you said you were going to do, and now you want to change. There must be something wrong with you. So I think there's the first step you've identified it there in value leakage, is that the value dissipates if you can't be flexible and agile and in responding to the market conditions and environmental conditions and social conditions, to bring in the ESG factors. Then pulling it down through the organization into the, as you say, the real business plans. What we don't see generally in our steering committees and our oversight bodies is and people say, no, we don't want to see it because it's this is too much detail, is what are those change initiatives that are being driven by the business? As you say here, BAU, the business as usual change initiatives that are coming through. I want to automate this, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to change the functionality of a system to do that. And essentially all of those little things add up together to become, well, this is what we're doing as a business, which is not aligned necessarily to the strategy, because those little things, no one's overseeing them, but they are chewing resources and they're chewing capacity. And those are the death by 1,000 cuts, because that is detracting you from actually what you should be putting money on. I've seen so many times, I had I've obviously led large projects, but where I've had, when I've delved into the detail, and I had in this one particular organization, this one woman said, I want to automate this manual process, because this manual process is taking us, it could take us a couple of minutes and it's taking us a whole week. That's great. And I think, that the thinking is definitely in the right place. But right now, we focused on this strategic initiative. And the reason why we've got the 3 people employed to do that process is, well, they've got employment. If we were to automate that, it doesn't only bring the system change, it brings personnel change, it brings, there's no easy change. You have to consider the whole context again. So sorry, you're going to have to stay looking at your spreadsheets, etc. Great upset because of that decision, but you're going to have to make these hard decisions when it comes down to the real business plans to make sure that they keep tracking against the overall strategy. Otherwise, you're going to get that leakage.
So this whole connection is a theme we'll dive into, but just some little amusing diagrams you can find just to emphasize the point that there's often the stereotype that those of us that are working on the 5-year plans are somehow in a hermetically sealed environment that doesn't really listen to what's going on. And the other stereotype around execution is that those that are coming up with the strategy have no clue as to how it might actually happen, and it's a miracle that somehow brings that into life because there's no visibility of what's going on or process in place to enable it to happen. So just some introductory remarks there that I don't know if they resonate with folks, but we thought we'd just kick off using those as examples. And to develop the connection, disconnection and loss theme, it is true that if we're not careful, the objectives that we seed at board level may well be being done perhaps without understanding of bandwidth for delivery. But if the comms and explanation isn't good down to the portfolio level, then we can start to see disconnected programs. We can see inappropriate prioritization and selection. We can see pet projects consuming resource and competition resources kicking in. And if we don't communicate effectively down to delivery, where we don't have a sensible approach for how those are managed consistently and coherently, we can lose meaning in the handover to delivery. We can lose meaning in the realization of benefits, where we can't see progress towards strategic objectives happening very well. And maybe even the worst outcome of this is that every 5-year strategy, 2 years in, is no longer relevant, is drifted away from being what the business is doing anyway, and has to be chopped and reset. Maybe the CEO magically moves on to the next job, and the business suffers. So this integration and loss isn't just an operational issue. It can lead to tragedy with respect to an organization's future, and sometimes very senior people's future as well.
This is such a great diagram, David. I mean, this really just shows you the points of leakage through the whole process, and pet projects, and you see it passage talk, right, where those are the pet projects start happening, and just making sure that you get this traction on your strategy. And there you see it, when it comes back, having to get a great reset, because actually you've tracked so far, it's so far removed. You're not just rebaselining, because of the need to be agile, but you're actually having to reset your thinking. And I think this is a particularly important diagram. So thank you for this, David.
So in addition to the practical losses that might get communicated down and back up again, we've got to think about how we actually implement priorities. And we hear people talk about prioritization. What they're meaning is deciding what they spend their leadership time, resources, and funds on. So let's be clear about that. We don't just come up with a score for a project because we want to rank it. It's because we're looking to deploy resources and funds to get it done. So if we've got it, but all of our organizations, I can't think of any that don't have two sides to this. They've got to perform today and they've got to perform tomorrow. So every organization has a run the business perspective and a change the business perspective. And how do we prioritize resources between performing today and performing tomorrow? So I think every organization, either formally recognized or somewhere in it, will have maybe 3 kinds of workloads going on. It'll have its transformation portfolio, where it's looking to drive change and invest in tomorrow. It'll have its value generation portfolio, where it's products and services for today and tomorrow, and perhaps even the selling and marketing of those products. That effort kicks in. And then there's the operations and regulatory portfolio, the business aspects of the business that keep the lights on, that manage the risk, that run the finance. And the reality is that if we're looking to take our business forward, then we'll have our strategy will give us some strategic steps. And the objectives and challenges that gives us will look to be delivering over time, and that will suck resource and leadership and funds out of our business. But at the same time, we have to perform for today, and we have to operate and produce today. And the reality is, in the short term at least, the amount of people we have, the amount of leadership we have, the funds that we have is kind of finite. And do we always look and are we able always to be able to do that balance, to do the trade-off? Or is it that some people see strategy as what gets the scraps left after the business as usual consumption has happened? I don't know what your view is.
This is so important. You see, in my experience, the CEOs are so focused on running the business, making the profits, getting the returns, making sure that, even the executive committee, the top management are, how are you doing in your respective portfolios? How is this organization performing? But actually, where is the project office? Where is the change? Where is that tracking? Are those change initiatives actually spoken about as an equal part to the change and run? Or are we just talking about runs in our executive committee meetings or our management meetings? And to my experience to date, it's been mainly on the run. How are we doing? Not how are we doing with the change? And more as we move forward with the impacts of climate change, the impact of social activism, the impacts of digitization, and now, of course, with the new big regulatory changes coming down the line, with sustainability reporting, having information that we've never looked at, most organizations have never looked at, don't know the language to do with that information, is having now to consider it in their resource planning and report on it. That's a big change. Now, for an organization that's hasn't flexed that change muscle, you're going to have a problem. So I think this picture highlights the problem in that you've got the run and the change that need to be overseen and monitored and adapted as the organization moves forward.
It's the whole project management and portfolio approach talks about prioritizing projects, but we can't just prioritize projects. We've got to prioritize workloads, whether they're for strategic steps or performance. We have to make decisions and trade-offs, and I don't think that's always really at the fore. There is a more sophisticated diagram in the slide pack which people can access, but that's just a challenge that we need to think about.
Yeah, and as you say here, looking at the circle on the left, this continual circle here is that, in fact, you can't look at one or the other. You have to look at both of them together. Yeah.
So, okay, time then to ask you guys to offer some thoughts. So we're looking to share some thoughts from you guys. Please, if you have a moment on your phone or computer, access slido.com. There's the number to the event code to provide. I've offered you some headings. You can disregard them if you like, but there's some headings here in which we can categorize experiences, strategy, delivery not being perfect. For example, you might find that you have issues in sensing and listening to your organization as to what the strategy should end up being. There may be issues in formulation. Do you have problems coming up with a strategy? Integrating it and aligning the different competing aspects to your strategy? Or is prioritization and delivery and balance of your BAU and change and value generation not good? If you have a comment that relates to these areas, please add them in. I believe that the event is up and running.
Yes, I've got it. If anyone has any problems accessing it, just put it in the chat. If you have any questions, please, again, pop it in the chat. Mark is here, so Mark will be able to help us with the conversation. But I see, so it says, what is your experience of strategy delivery success in any of the 4 areas shown on the screen? Do you want us to comment on each of the 4, or just the main ones that we...
Any or as many, or even if you have comments that don't fit within those areas, that's fine too. But if you have a comment on one of the areas, prefix your comment with a number, or just put in your comment. Just what are your experiences of strategy delivery not being perfect? And the scores as they come in, there are people typing. We'll just see what people's views are. It's takes a few moments to tap in, so I tried to waffle a bit on the last slide to give people some time. But appearance of strategy delivery success, I mean, I can offer one for a starter, which is well, here we go. Sensing and listening. Executives just don't know and appreciate what's really happening. Yeah, that's so there's certainly an appreciation of what market conditions are and as to what the capability and capacity of the organization is. We've kind of teased that one. Yeah. Communication
absolutely.
up and down. Communication up and down, I guess.
Sorry, sorry, David. Just in terms of this one, I think, yes, sometimes executives don't, I mean, this is such an important point, just don't want to know. They want to know that it's all happening, and you guys, look, I've given you that you want, this is the time you said you would take. This is what you said you were going to deliver. I've given you how much you need to do, or how much you needed to deliver it. Now go away and do it. And if there are any issues, I don't want to hear about them, sort them out. So there's a little bit about, I just don't want to know. So it's almost like sweep it under the carpet, because I can't, as a project, I can't do anything with it except sweep it under the carpet until at the end of the day, after all of these changes, you've got these compromises through the projects, and it's been swept under the carpet. And then you have this carpet just not being able to take all of this dirt underneath it. So yes, it's very important.
The clear communication, I guess, is an issue we mentioned earlier about leakage. Being able to turn the strategic objectives into tangible action plans. Well, yeah, how does if you're right, if the strategy is set high level, how is that decomposed into something that's actionable? Prioritizing, yeah, I guess prioritizing, working out what the value of a strategic item is, and I guess if people are bonused and targeted on today's performance, and their kiddies get Nike trainers at Christmas rather than Umbro, if they perform today, then that's not going to be conducive to effective strategy delivery for tomorrow, is it? Formulation, not enough stakeholder engagement. Yeah, all stakeholders considered. Yeah, so what? That's good. Acceptance change is the most difficult thing. However, I've seen the organisation rely on vocal but blind grip. Yeah, it's about communication and engagement again, isn't it?
It seems to be the biggest one that's coming through. What are the other 3 that we had on the screen? If you can just alt tab across to that.
There's sensing and listening. Executives just don't want to know. Clear communication, being able to turn strategic objectives into tangible action plans. Leaders only listen to other leaders within the organisation, not the employees. Prioritization on immediate benefit. No or little assurance. So unaware of, yeah.
I can see them, yeah. As you say, it all is about the effective or ineffective engagement. I like that assurance one as well. Is it this independent feedback? So the resources, your internal audit, if you've got an internal audit or risk team, are generally focused on the business as usual controls that are about to potentially scupper the business from actually operating. And they're limited in their resources to pretty much that. And when they look at the change initiatives, what I'm generally seeing is that you get the normal old checklist, yes, key man risk, and people that are ill, or it's just formulaic.
Lame,
Instead
yeah.
of saying, for this particular project, these are the things that are particular risks to not achieving the objectives. So it is a problem, a bit of a formulaic to every change is the same kind of change. It's not. And I think that's what's coming through here clearly, is that people are, just like in cybersecurity, people are a big issue, need to be engaged.
Yes, and no one's mentioned about possible conflict of strategies, about different levels and different layers of strategy not necessarily lining up, or being aware that there are competing strategies. There's probably loads we can go on. But can
I just mention here, so one of the things that I'm quite conscious of is that when a project slips, so you plan it all in terms of the capacity of the organization in doing their run job. So if you're thinking about a call center in winter, a call center in a health insurance organization in winter is going to be very busy trying to approve various things and medications and things like that. And you don't want a new system to go live when the call center is over capacity.
Yeah.
But what happens, so you plan it that way, but what happens is that the project slips until the point where you try and implement it at the time when you're sitting in a red hot capacity issues. In fact, then the project needs to be called to stop until the team is able to take the change. So there's a bit of, you talk about the strategies themselves conflicting, but in fact the conflict between the change and the run is also conflicting. I like that one about sponsorship, taking accountability. That's also a big one.
Guys, we best move on. I'll leave the poll open. So if folks have other thoughts they want to just pop in, what I'll do is I'll collect all these and comment on them and share them back and give you some categorization. So we'll play this stuff back to you. But just moving on, looking at the time, just in case nobody had actually said anything, and it went dead and it was, no one was interested. Please don't try and read this, but if you go to Google and look for strategy delivery success, there are lots and lots of reasons for strategy delivery problems, loads and loads and loads and loads and loads. I won't pick any out. You can read this after the show, as it were. But the point is, and a brief canvas from people. This is the issue. There are too many issues for us to rely on magic somehow happening. The point there, with respect to strategy delivery, wizardry is not going to deliver your strategy. But my view is that engineering your organization to operate effectively might. And the guy on the left, Harry Potter, kind of suggests that. The guy on the right, it's not me. It's a famous English engineer, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. So I don't think that organizations can kind of leave strategy to some kind of hope and wish for it. To me, organizations need to build some infrastructure to enable it to happen. And I don't think in lots of organizations that there's plenty of focus on the projects, but not necessarily on the strategy integration bit. So that bold statement aside, we'll then position effective organizational governance as the framework set to manage and deliver performance, but assuming that magic doesn't happen. So what do we need to engineer to put in place? Well, let's just have a little look at what we're talking about here. So strategy delivery in most organizations is not integrated. And how does disconnected governance look? Well, if we examine a picture of an organization operating ideally, it's listening to the outside world for opportunities, threats, and imperatives, and so on. It's listening to its owners and interpreting, turning its purpose into goals that your senior team will be reflecting on and turning into strategy, bearing in mind performance and current strengths and weaknesses. And we hope that the strategy will produce some actionables, will produce a corporate plan which bites off a piece of the strategy and defines objectives, targets, and challenges that it can distribute through its leadership teams. And for each point of the business, for example, sales, marketing, whatever, we kind of hope that they'll be given or be able to debate and agree their piece of the pie with respect to objectives, targets, and challenges. And then there will be many departments from sales, finance, commercial, whatever that is. But we've also got various strategic themes going on, various strategic programs. So we can't just think about departments and operating across them. We need to think about the cross-functional, cross-project initiatives that we have ongoing. But just thinking of one department, for example, sales, it will interpret what it's been delegated in terms of objectives, targets, and challenges. It will have an understanding of its local perspective on its opportunities, threats, imperatives, and goals, and it will come up with a business as usual a plan and strategy for what it's going to do and define its objectives, targets, and challenges, which it will distribute to its sub teams and different areas, and so on and so forth. So in reality, we've not just got one strategy. We've not just got one set of objectives, targets, and challenges, or opportunities, threats, imperatives. We've got many. And how do all these align? How can we see the line of sight from the objectives, targets, and challenges we have at a board level to what that means that the head of sales is taking on in their area, to what a team lead in their part of the business is turning into tasks? How do we get that visibility? And I think there's an issue here, because I think a lot of organizations manage by PowerPoint or manage with Excel. There's a lot of this stuff created, a lot of documents produced, but is it aligned? Is it integrated? Is it current? Is it real? Is it traceable? How do we see what it is, yet alone communicate down what it should be, yet alone understand what's going on in conflict to that, yet alone what the response to it in terms of performance actually is? And if we had integrated data, if we had information that was connected, aligned, current, real, traceable, we might find it a little bit easier, a little bit faster to coordinate the local and corporate strategies. But without that information connection, how do we keep on top of all this stuff?
So David, a question to you, and I know I haven't put this to you before, but so I bring in a project management tool. How does that help or not help? Honestly, when I use project management tools, I find that I've got several projects and I'm still managing them by Excel anyway, but that's my personal experience. What is your sense of project management tools in solving this problem?
Well, it doesn't. For me, the project management tool is the bit that copes with tasks down here. We're looking at three kinds of technology on the page here. We've got the corporate risk log, which has the opportunities, threats, imperatives, and goals in it from each of the levels, so we can see the corporate risk. There's the OKR solution, so we can understand what the objectives, targets, and challenges are and how they cascade through the organization. And there's the project
OKR solution. Just explain that a bit.
OKR, objectives and key results. So there are solution sets out there which allow us to define our objectives, targets, and challenges, and then set up key performance indicators which describe how those objectives can be seen as being achieved, and even break them down and relate them to sub-objectives and even to objectives that we give to individuals. So we got the corporate risk, we got the objectives and key results. We've got the KPI solution. So what do you use to measure performance? People probably cobble together spreadsheets and PowerPoints and ad hoc bits of Power BI here and there. And then you've got your project management
solution. And the supporting budgets, the budget solution and the the finance systems needed to, and as you say, the HR systems, performance management systems behind this. There's just lots to be cobbling together, and lots of opportunity for missteps.
I did actually add a slide in here which described this more fully, and it will be in the fuller pack. There's a picture of this with the information sets that we need. But I think corporate risk, to let us see risk, OKRs, so we can see how they cascade and how they relate, the performance management solution, so I can see the KPIs, and the project management solution or solutions that let us track activities and performance across a business.
As an IT person, I will use this as a big excuse to say, and I live on the end, and you're wanting me to do what?
Well, yes, there's well, you live on the end and do your bit, but hopefully others...
and IT, because IT gets the results of all of this. They have to make the change, and you go, well, okay, all of this needs to happen properly before my change can be seen as being valuable.
I'm doing this with an organization right now. We're looking at all those lovely PowerPoints, and we're extracting from the PowerPoints the purpose, the key objectives, and we're trying to datify that, if you like, so we can track it and integrate it. We can't track and integrate stuff that's buried in PowerPoints. Yeah, that's a whole nother workshop. So
looking forward to it.
So in terms of folks today, and I'll just turn that poll on. Can we spend just a couple of minutes? So thinking of we've chatted about strategy delivery and the pains there, but for those of you that have tried to implement a strategy delivery solution, I don't just mean system, but for those of you who tried to operationalize strategy delivery, what are the pain points that you guys have had? So same deal, go back to Slido. It should be in there already, actually. I've suggested some headings. You can't, agreement of key stakeholders, is that difficult? Is the information model about what your strategy is just not there and too difficult or too inappropriate or inaccurate to use? Do you have an operating model that really does this, or is it all held together by string? And do you have ability to manage and drive change? I mean, those are just some headings, but what are your thoughts on your difficulties implementing a systematic approach to strategy? Some of you might even think that it's impossible to engage senior stakeholders to want to do something about operationalizing strategy. That might even be the first. So that's the agreement of key stakeholders step. But I'll have waffled a bit. And any more that you thought of, Carolyn, before I just hit next and see what people are saying?
No, I think we've got, we had a lot in the first discussion that will come through here, I think, in terms of agreement with the key stakeholders. That is communication. What do you feel about this one?
Well, this is a typical change thing, isn't it? It's about getting a hearts and minds one. That's change management and transformation activity. We need professionals to if we have an A to B journey to take us through, then do we? It's not just a case of imposing something, is it? Because a dog that doesn't like new tricks that's being imposed upon is going to bite you.
Yes, and that's the support networks. If you don't establish, what I've found is if you don't establish a promoting support network, you're going to get one developing anyway, and that's the detracting support network. It's going to happen. So yes, you're going to have to work on the change management aspects as a deep component, a necessary component to transformation, to any kind of change, is understanding human dynamics.
I think also there's reticence. So our organisation is set up for small change initiatives from simple IT, but not major business change. Yeah. So yeah. There's getting the right level of leadership and drive into the right level of change is vital.
I also think capacity is an issue. We're so busy doing, and I talk about just the levels of activity in our minds. If we sitting in red the whole time, it's difficult just doing. It's difficult to stop and think about what it is that we're doing. And I feel that sometimes, well, these change initiatives need more of the green blue thinking side of things. And so when you are sitting in the red space, it's very difficult for people to justify not being busy and actually downgrading into the green blue space, or the creativity space, to be able to do both. So it's difficult for humans to be able to juggle the two kinds of spaces.
I think also there's with respect to change, we're talking about here with integrated governance is integrating and harmonizing, and if there are practices that are operating in certain areas, there's sometimes reticence to adapt your process for somebody else's benefit. So there are I think some natural change aversion issues, but also some what's in it for me issues, when the what's in it for them isn't immediately for them, but it's for the business as a whole.
That is a very difficult one to crack. There has to be a WIFM, a what's in it for me, as well as a what's in it for the organization, because I've been burnt by that so many times, when actually as individuals I'd rather stay and complain and shoot from the sidelines, because then I'm not personally invested, because there's nothing in this for me personally. So I'd rather let the organization bumble along, because there's nothing in it for me personally, because I'm not held accountable, and I'm not buying in to what you're telling me.
Yeah, and another issue is if there's if people don't have visibility of what you're up to strategically now, and you're happily putting effort into change that's helping you perform to what your objectives are. If people start spotting that, well, what you're doing doesn't support the strategic direction that we're going in, and starts to ask pointy questions, that maybe we don't want that visibility, and
sweep it under the carpet.
Well, again, folks, we need to move on, just because we're running out of time. I'll leave the poll active, so if people want to keep chipping away, please do. And as I say, we'll reply to all these as part of the post-event follow-up. But as we've seen, there are difficulties in strategy delivery, and difficulty in getting strategy delivery ecosystems up and running for various reasons. In a similar event that I've run recently with the PMI, some points that came out of that were just generally now about unresponsive and uncommunicated strategy formulation, multiple strategies that are difficult to integrate, absence of framework for prioritizing business as usual work, change and value generation, the lack of proper accountability and acceptance of accountability. I'll not read them all, but there's a whole bunch of reasons. But limited business support resources to orchestrate decision making, that was a key one. And the information infrastructure just not prepared for integrated governance. Those are the two barriers, I think, to getting a strategy delivery ecosystem in place. If you haven't got people to drive it, it's not going to get driven. If you haven't got information to underpin it, you can't run it.
You need to get the door, David, and I can carry on here.
Oh, it's just a postman.
Scott.
It's just postman Scott, yeah. But you carry on anyway. So.
No, carry on. You're welcome to carry on.
So we need then to position a couple of things to address this. So the first one is a set of principles to draw from. And Carolyn, please introduce people to this.
Thank you. So ISO 37000 is the new governance of organizations guidance that's come out of the International Standards Organization. And it's really positioned at governance of organizations, and it's all the roles involved in the governance of organizations. In fact, right in the beginning, when they talk about setting the context and the conditions, the right conditions for governance, it does talk about integrated governance. And that's recognizing that there's a thread of governance throughout the organization. So yes, the governing body, the board of trustees, etc., the governing body is responsible for the governance and accountable for the governance of the organization. But the consequences of that governance is felt throughout the organization, and the principles need to be applied. So essentially, the principles are written with the primary governance principle sitting in the middle, that being the purpose of the organization. And in fact, this principle is double-sided. There's the purpose and the organizational values. So it basically what it says is that you can't fulfill your purpose if it's outside of the values, your behaviors, your norms that you've set for the organization. And then around that, you've got the your foundational governance principles. These are the things that you're going to be purposefully focusing on when you're governing. And beyond the purpose, one of the things you focus on is that value generation. So when you spoke about value generation earlier, David, this really resonated with me, because what that principle is saying, and it's the only one that's really gone into a little more detail about the practices. It's basically saying, you need to establish an environment, a system for ensuring that you're delivering value. You're not only creating value, you're actually delivering it and overseeing the delivery of it. You've got it aligned with your organizational principles and policies, and that you're actually distributing value at the end of the day, when value has been created, in a balanced way according to the objectives that you set. So not all stakeholders in a capitalistic environment, not all stakeholders are going to get everything that they want. So you're going to have to balance and create a balance between, is it the shareholders, is it the customers, is it the accounting for your use of carbon or your production of carbon. So it's that kind of balancing, and that setting those objectives give a clear outline in terms of then how the strategy aligns with those achieving those value generation objectives. And then, of course, the strategy being a key component of the governance of an organization, which needs to be overseen, in terms of making sure that it's tracking against the principles that have been set, and that the governing body is able to demonstrate its accountability to the organization for its governance of the organization, including its oversight of the strategy, and the organization can demonstrate its accountability for the use of the resources that's been given to it. So I think those foundational governance principles are really important. Of course, in the 21st century, there's more than just the basics. So the basics really come from the background of Professor Garrett, Bob Tricker, John Carver, Professor Mervyn King. Their thinking really has gone into those foundational, but in the 21st century, we need more than that. As you say, stakeholder engagement, critical, ethical and effective leadership, making sure you have the right data to make the decisions. You can't get data out of the PowerPoints. Risk governance, you see those OKRs, that you said that's one of the systems that we're going to be looking at. Social responsibility and viability and performance over time being the two sustainability factors, making sure that when you are implementing your strategy or you're enabling your strategy, that you do consider your impact on the environment and society, but likewise that you're agile enough to consider those impacts on you as well. The floods in Sydney, we just had fires in Sydney, now we've got floods in Sydney. In fact, we've got floods all over the world. And we've got other cities in the world that are in day zero, no water. So making sure that we consider those larger factors in our sustainability. And then, of course, the ultimate objective of governance is so that the organization can achieve these outcomes in terms of being responsible for the resources, stewarding the resources that you have at your disposal, your own resources and the resources, the natural resources and societal resources, goodwill. There we spoke about that in terms of you're going to have to balance your resources between run and change and various change initiatives. Effective performance, of course, setting targets and achieving your targets, and being agile when you are achieving your targets, and being flexible in terms of your targets. You might have to rebaseline. And then obviously, while you're doing all of this, behaving with the right ethics, behaving according to your organizational values, behaving as individuals, behaving as an organization, as they call it, a good corporate citizen. But then also it's the leadership behaving properly. And I won't go into leadership behaving properly, given you guys are in the UK. But that's just a whistle stop in terms of how strategy fits in with this new internationally agreed benchmark for governance.
There's lots of good stuff in here. You have to buy it, but the standard is, I read it and really liked it and found it easy to read, to be honest. But it's a great set of principles to run your organization by. But I guess the challenge is, what do you run your organization with? And we need to that while the goal isn't to implement an ISO 37000 compliant organization, there are lots of principles in here that we already have or should be considering. So how do we move on from, how do we get beyond the book and apply these to our situations?
Can I just mention quickly that APMG International has a couple of courses on this. So we've got the foundations of foundational certification on 37,000. APMG also has the business relationship management certifications, and that has some of this thinking in it as well. So there are some go-to places if you did want to become certified.
Yeah. There'll be some links in here as well. I'll point people out to, but just zipping along, the principles are great, the methods are great, but we need to implement an operating model. And the illustration on the right there, kind of showing that we've got a number of wheels turning in our organizations, and we need to align them so they all work together. And to my mind, unless we put some effort into getting those wheels to align and have a perspective which looks across the machine, not just out of one area, we're going to struggle to make this machine work effectively. So the business integrated governance approach is about creating a model and applying that to an organization to address the challenges in ISO 37000 and enable that to be carried out. There's quite a bit to it, so we'll just do an introduction, but basically it's a model that explains, and I'll just read this, how to connect strategic drivers, the BAU organization, those that are focusing on managing products and implementing change. It's about getting a holistic, integrated, nicely ungrinding cog-based machine. It enables information-centric decisions, the key principle of ISO 37000, enabling clear accountability, a clear principle of ISO 37000. It's been created by a club as it's now a community interest company, and there's a version of it embedded within Praxis. And the areas it looks into are is your organization understood? Is it documented? Does it know its roles and responsibilities? Has it got an effective governance operation that connects top to bottom and it's managed? Underpinning that, have you got an effective information and data capability that provides the information to run governance with? Have you got machinery to help you create information so that it's not a pain in the backside to have to go and manufacture this report or that to operate it? Accountability and operation of accountability underpins it, and empowerment of people to be accountable. But it talks about some key principles of having business support in place to make this happen, not just project support, but business support, because business support needs to go beyond the project into products, into business as usual, into operations to enable us to manage our resources, issues and risks, as well as on projects. Assurance was a point that somebody raised. So are we doing the right things the right way? And is our leadership providing the environment and culture and drive to operate consistently, and funding the change and improvement to get us up a level to operate this effectively? So there's some links there to delve into some more material. So please do have a look at that. There's a wealth of it. It's all free and in the public domain. And it's the called P3M Data Club. It's a community interest company. There's a website, there's an active user group. It's been going a few years now. It's developed this language set that you're free to use. It's had over 100 people contribute to the thoughts behind it, the content within it, and the review of it. And it's published in Praxis. So some of you who'll know APMG's portfolio, Praxis is part of that. And we've published a version of this in the Praxis framework, so you can consume it there as well. So what next? So do you buy in and recognize difficulty with strategy delivery? Do you recognize the symptoms? Do you see ISO 37000 as a set of principles with which you can solve it? We believe that the big framework offers a mechanism for making specific readiness to enable you to to deliver strategy more effectively. What next? Well, there's a whole list of useful materials, as Carolyn referred to some of them. There's an event blog up and running where I'll be sharing some thoughts on this, but the ISO standard is there. There's the online course that Carolyn mentioned. And there's probably more links we can add to this material when we send it out. If you want to know more about BIG itself, there's some YouTube stuff there, but just go to YouTube and search for Core P3M Data Club and you'll find it. And the version of it available in Praxis, it's there. So this session's been a case-making, introductory, signposting session, really. If you'd like, we'd be more than happy to run a follow-on session, which more deeply goes into ISO 37000, more deeply goes into BIG, and helps you maybe make the case of what's in it for me, for the different stakeholders you're working with, because it might not be obvious, and we can cover that in a session. Talk about a roadmap, because this doesn't all happen at once, and talk about what a first steps approach might look like. How do you even get this on the executive agenda?
Absolutely. I think those are all webinars in their own right and discussion points. So we're looking forward to in the discussion forum, and you can see it on the Good Governance Academy website under the research tab, the discussion forum for integrated governance. And we'll certainly be bringing through all of these events. I do see Lindy Kruber is on the line. Lindy is our head of the programs, the research programs and discussion forums on the Good Governance Research Forum. So we're looking forward to combining this information together with other discussions going forward. Any last words from your side, Mark? And just from my side, thank you very much, David. I really appreciate this.
Well, if there are other links we've got, Carolyn, I'll stick them on this slide, and when we share it out, any other links that we think are useful, we can stick on here. So that will include everything.
Yeah, thanks, David.
Well, it's 1 o'clock. Has anyone got any last thoughts or questions? But
yeah, I just looking at the chat area and the Q&A photo, I can't see anything outstanding. So I think with a few final thoughts, we'll wrap up there, I guess. So
thanks, Mark. Anything from your side?
No, not really, other than to say there's some links there. David's already covered a lot of links there where you can, take next steps and find out more. Yeah, from me, my perspective, I'll just thank everyone for attending, for joining us today. Great to have you with us, and thank you to David and Carolyn for your insights and expertise today. It's a lot of food for thought for our attendees, and yeah, so thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks.